Hey everybody, it's Jimmy from the DIY and Digital, and today I'm riding on a real train. Welcome everybody to a very special episode of the DIY and Digital. Today I'm doing something a little different. Recently, I was lucky enough to take a trip from Denver, Colorado to Reno, Nevada on board the California Zephyr, one of Amtrak's most scenic routes. And we're going to take a look at that, but first, if you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss any updates, including ones like this where I look at real railroads for modeling inspiration. I spent 25 hours on the train and was able to step off and observe several stops along the way. And I'm going to be sharing some of those stops, including one that was set up perfectly to model. Now, my trip started early in the morning at Denver's Union Station. The station is absolutely gorgeous and is a hub for most of the commuter light rail lines throughout the Denver metro. So the station is very busy. Now, my train was running about an hour behind, so I was able to look around a little bit. Once the train had arrived, it actually backed into Union Station. This was a long stop, so crews actually had time to clean the cars. Now, there was quite a line to get on. The passengers were divided into two lines, coach and sleeper cars. The coach line was a lot longer. Then it was time to board. I stowed all of my gear and headed to the dining car for breakfast. As I ate, I was able to get some good views of some BNSF power in the Denver yard. Then we headed out of town. It didn't take long for our scenery to become simply stunning, and for our trip to head over its first famous railroad landmark, Big Ten Curve. You'll notice the old hopper cars the railroad uses as windbreakers here. We did have to wait for a freight train to pass with two helpers at the end, then we headed up the curve. Once we were through, we began our quest into the Rockies, and the views were spectacular. We then came across our next landmark, the Moffett Tunnel. We were not allowed to cross between cars inside this tunnel because of the soot. It took about 10 minutes to get through the tunnel. We popped out of the Moffett Tunnel at our first stop, Frazer Colorado. Frazer is a small town with a small station, and the stop lasted about 5 minutes. Here are some photos of the depot if you would like to model it. We then continued our trip into the Rockies, winding along the Colorado River and cutting through more tunnels than I could count. The next big stop was Glenwood Springs. I consider this stop to be one that would be fun to model since you have a downtown area right at the tracks and tons of mountains all around. It looked like something straight off your average layout. We then headed to Grand Junction, a much simpler stop, but still with some impressive older architecture. I also saw dozens of Union Pacific Jeeps lined up at the Grand Junction yard. Utah was next, and what I saw was nothing short of stunning. The only incident we had on our trip was weather-related. Heavy storms had rolled through the night before, causing multiple block signals to malfunction, so we had to stop at several blocks and wait for clearance. This went on for a couple of blocks, then we were back up to 80 miles per hour through the Utah desert. Overnight, we passed through Salt Lake City, and I awoke to a glorious sunrise and breakfast in Nevada. We finally arrived in Reno, where I was picked up by my friend, and we headed off into the Sierras. All in all, it was a wonderful trip, and a great insight into how passenger rail works in the US. If you would like to model passenger rail, here are some tips for realism. The first thing is the train arrangement. The westbound California Zephyr has 2 locomotives, both A units, a baggage car, then several sleeping cars. The middle of the train was the dining car, followed by the observation lounge car. Then there were several coach cars and an abrupt end. The Denver Amtrak stop was the longest of all of them, lasting about 30 minutes. Most stops were around 5 minutes, with a couple being flag stops where the stop lasted around 1 minute. The train itself traveled around 80 miles an hour in the wide open straights and slowed to around 30 miles per hour in the mountains. My train seemed to always have priority when it came to a meet, as we passed several long manifest freights waiting on a passing siding of a block. I asked my cabin attendant about it, and he said most of the time passenger trains have the right-of-way. I hope you enjoyed this video, and it not only gives you some inspiration for your scenery, but it also gives you a better understanding of the American passenger rail system and how to model it accurately. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any updates, including ones like this where I take a look at real railroads that you can model. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Happy railroading.